Well, hello, everybody. Apologies for the late start. We had a late running work session, so we're a couple minutes behind. Is everybody, looks like everybody's joined us online. Is Councilman Bajent just not here today, or are we waiting for him? Okay, all right. Then council's all here, so we'll go ahead and start with an invocation, which is a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent, Clegg,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
Sanchez,
Here.
Thompson,
Here.
Woodings.
Here.
5 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Next up, we have a request for approval of the minutes of the work session and regular evening meeting from the 29th of September.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the minutes of September 29th, both the work session and regular evening meeting. Second.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just let the record show that I was not available at the 6 p.m. meeting, so I'll abstain from that one. I think Sanchez as well.
So noted. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have special business. I see Celine here to present a reconsideration
Oh,
request.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, something else?
We have an agenda amendment, but it looks like it made it on the electronic agenda, so I don't know if I.
Council President.
Oh, okay. So I do need to make a motion to accept the amended agenda.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Madam Mayor, I move that pursuant to Idaho Code Sections 74-2044B, that we adopt the agenda as amended to include special business item CAR 19-25 reconsider vote request. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And Madam Mayor, if I could make a comment just for the public, the public hearing on bike bars was noticed to occur tonight, but did not end up on the agenda. Because it never appeared on the posted agenda, we can't make a motion on it, so council should note it at the beginning of the meeting. So that's what I'm doing. Rather than have a hearing on it tonight, it has been placed on the work session for October 20th, and the public hearing may be rescheduled after that work session, depending on what council decides.
Great, thank you. Okay, so on my agenda, I had the special business already, so you were approving the new agenda. With that, Celine, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, council members, last week you heard a rezone for 3.3 acres at the intersection of Boise Avenue and Protest. The applicant has requested reconsideration of the vote. If reconsideration is granted, staff will ensure that a public hearing is scheduled and properly noticed. And the request is before you tonight.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
having read through the reasons for reconsideration, I am not inclined to move to reconsider. I believe that we would be forced again to make a decision from the dais about changes rather than having those come through the process. I recognize that this particular applicant has had to wait a long time because of COVID-19, but I'm not convinced that that's a reason to reconsider tonight.
Right.
Second. Do we need to?
Nope.
Okay.
But good to know you agree. All right.
Oh, Madam Mayor, I will be abstaining as I wasn't part of this.
So just to be clear, there's no vote being
Oh,
taken.
I apologize. Never
That's
mind.
okay.
So, Madam Mayor,
Unless-
just on a reconsideration, just to review the process, if no motion is made, then it dies.
All right. For lack of a motion, then I will move us beyond special business and into the consent agenda. Thanks, Aileen. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
would like to see a few items under resolutions removed from the consent agenda. It would be Resolution 46120, the SRO contracts. So Resolution 46120, Resolution 46220, Resolution 46320.
Yep.
I think that's
Yep.
it.
Okay.
All right. Madam Mayor, I would move to approve the consent agenda absent those three resolutions that were pulled off.
Second.
Okay, we had President Pro Tem Wooding second that. The clerk, will you please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
If I could, if it's appropriate now to have a discussion on those three resolutions, and then we could vote on them.
Sure.
If it's appropriate, I'll kick it off. I asked the question about school resource officers of Chief Lee during his presentation because I knew that these resolutions were on the agenda tonight. Recognizing that this is one of the places within the police department that there may be room for some changes that will respond to some of the concerns that we've heard over the last year, but also recognizing that at the moment, we don't have really enough data to understand how these are working, how well they're working, what is working well, what might be better. I believe Chief Lee is correct to go forward with these contracts as is while we collect some of that data and consider what changes we might make responding to the data we collect. And so with that, I would move approval of resolutions 46120, 46220, and 46320.
Second.
Great, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor,
I'll have the seconder go first and then Councilmember Sanchez.
Madam Mayor, I concur with what Council President Clegg has said, and also want to add that I think this is a conversation that we've intended on having with the school district, but because of the upheaval that COVID-19 has caused within the schools and, just the, shifting environment and shifting plans, that they've been dealing with on a daily basis. The time hasn't been right to have that conversation, but I think that once things get settled out, having a really robust conversation about SROs, their function, how effective they are in achieving their objectives is definitely warranted and should be had.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, thank you for allowing us to have this discussion. I guess for me, I feel like this is an opportunity for us to really show our commitment to those members of the community who've been very vocal about wanting us to take a closer look at the way our police department interacts with the community. I know for myself, I grew up in Burley, and I just don't remember there being a strong police presence in school. There was a very strong police presence in our community, but not in school. And at this point, I don't know that that's something that I don't know that that's something I support. I know that we have had police presence at our schools, but in listening to Chief Lee's presentation earlier and talking about how it's so difficult for our police officers to spend time in the community, I think about those police officers who are in the schools, and perhaps there's a possibility for them to be more engaged throughout the community, not specifically at the schools. I would like to see in our schools perhaps more counselors, people who are actually trained to work with young people and to help meet the needs that they have. If there's two entities that I believe that our society places a lot of responsibility, and perhaps more than their fair share, it is teachers and police officers. And perhaps that work is better suited to folks who are trained to work with young people who come to school with a variety of issues, whether it's racism, child abuse, living in poverty, any number of issues, living with different types of learning disabilities. There's just so much that goes on in a school. And I feel that those needs are better served by folks who are trained specifically to meet those needs. So at this point, I would not vote in support of moving forward with the contract until we can see if this is actually working. Because to be honest, at this point, I don't know what the purpose of an SRO is in the public school system.
Madam Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate Councilmember Sanchez's concerns. And in fact, conversation I've had with our police chief is that I would like to look at best practices nationally for school resource officers. And as we had that conversation, I think both of us recognize that this is an area where it's potentially ripe for some real good improvements, some real good investigation. However, if we don't go forward with these contracts this year, first of all, we will disrupt what the school districts have already been planning for, a resource they rely on really for security concerns, given the kinds of security issues that schools have faced recently, and also would leave us in a position not to be able to collect the data that would inform what are these resource officers for, what are they doing, what can they do best. Certainly part of the conversation I had with the chief was whether or not it was possible and could be effective to pair resource officers with social workers or others to do that hard work that needs done and that often is asked of police officers or educational counselors who are not specifically trained of it. And he agreed that it might be a good idea to look into, but that there just wasn't enough time to do it for this year, and that there might be resources that we could look for that would actually allow us to do it in such a way that we could make it into a research project so we could really determine whether or not any changes we made were being effective. And so I am supporting it because I do want to move forward, finding the best way forward. And I always believe that getting good information leads to that. And I believe that moving forward with these contracts this year will allow us to get that good information.
Madam Mayor.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with all my colleagues' comments to some degree, regardless of how they're voting. I certainly, at this point, haven't seen anything that leads me to believe SROs are not a good decision. So at this point, I look forward to that conversation going forward, and ensuring that we make the right decision in future contracts. But I personally feel more safe having SROs as a father with my 6-year-old than not at this point. So I support these contracts, but want to continue digging in and looking at them going forward.
Madam Mayor,
Yep.
I'm going to vote in support of these contracts, and that may surprise some people. I'm not sure, but I do it with reluctance. Reluctance isn't the word that I'm looking for, but I do it wishing that I do think that we had time for a conversation, and I brought that up much earlier in the year. And I think that we still owe that conversation to our community. I think that we really do need to be having a deep conversation about what the future of policing looks like. And I really appreciate council leadership's desire for that same thing, and their efforts to bring the chief in to have these conversations that we've been having week after week after week. I do think that the community members should be involved in that discussion. And I would really love to hear what parents have to say, what the school district has to say, and what SROs have to say about what this would look like going forward. I wish we would have had that conversation before we were approving these tonight. I don't think that not approving the contracts is going to get us at a spot that's better than from where we're at right now. So I'll be voting yes. I still think we need to have that conversation.
Madam Mayor, one thing that I want to point out, and anybody's free to research this, there is disparity in the way that children of color are disciplined in relation to white kids. That is part of my concern. And also just learning over the last year that there is an assumption that I think some of us have that entities that are in charge of our public health are keeping track of racial and ethnic demographics as actions are taking place, and then to discover that that information is in fact not being gathered, which is really informative in terms of how people are treated disparately. That's part of why I have concerns about this is I wonder, and I don't know if the school districts collect this information or if BPD collects this information in working in the schools, how often children of color are singled out for disparate treatment in terms of disciplinary actions. So that is part of my concern.
Right, just before we take a vote, I wanted to say a couple things. The schools have asked us and continue to ask us to provide this as a service. They do see the SROs in the facilities as a way to help them prevent issues and also know better the students that are there. The conversations that the city has had with the school districts and Bishop Kelly and other entities that have requested SROs over the years have gone through kind of the impact and the reasons that the police department would want to continue to provide them, as well as the reasons that schools continue to want them. This is definitely part of the conversation that should continue. And we have asked over the years, prior to my time here, the prior administration and ours as well, for the school districts and the schools to partner with us in terms of costs, because this is very costly. And we believe it is an important service, which is why these contracts are on the agenda tonight. But given the fiscal constraints, the conversation in the public about what this should look like, the interest in the schools in having these, and of course our own interest in having them as well, this is a conversation we have to keep having. We will, Chief Lee is prepared to collect data in the coming years. We can know better how the SROs are being used and how it complements community policing. But then we need to have some serious conversations as a city and potentially with council leadership around the costs of that and how we are able to, whether we are able to maintain this without fuller participation. And I appreciate the moves and the agreements that the school districts have made in terms of getting to the point where they're supporting more of the costs than they have historically. That'll make a big difference as we move forward, trying to determine how best to keep this service within the community.
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
No.
Thompson. 4 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, everybody. We're now on, there's just one ordinance on second reading.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on second reading be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Second.
All right, without objection.
ORD-31-20, an ordinance amending Title 11, Chapter 07, Section 03, Subsection 05, Boise City Code, and providing an effective date.
Great. We are on to new business. First subdivision up is the Searle subdivision SUB 20-30. We've got Cody and then Ben Semple. If there's anything that you need to say, no, that's not Ben back there. I imagine that Ben's online. You can let us know after Cody speaks if you feel the need to add anything or if you're in agreement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This is a request for preliminary and final plat approval of a residential subdivision with just 2 buildable lots. The 0.14 acre site is located at 1715 South Longmont Avenue in an R2 or medium density residential zone. This project was heard in conjunction with the planned unit development at the Planning Commission back in August. That decision was not appealed, so it is only the subdivision that's before you this evening. The planned unit development approval did allow for a reduction in lot sizes and interior setbacks. It did not include any variances. The project is consistent with other smaller lots and homes in the neighborhood. Each home will have a garage to accommodate required parking. I would note that the commission did also support a request for a waiver from the requirement to install curb gutter and sidewalk at this time. They agreed with ACHD that a more holistic approach to this very short segment of street was probably better in this situation. With no opposition expressed at the commission hearing, and we remain unaware of any now, the subdivision does meet all of the objective requirements of the development code, and the commission found that it was supported by the policy guidance of Blueprint Boise. So with that, we are recommending approval of the application this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Cody. Questions for Cody? All right. Ben, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi there.
Hi. Ben Semple, 1014 South LaPointe Street, Suite 3, Boise, Idaho, 83706. Yeah, Cody did a great job kind of describing what this little infill project is, and we are in agreement with all the conditions of approval of the staff report.
Thank you.
I stand for questions.
Looks like you're getting off easy tonight. All right, with that, we close this issue.
Madam Mayor, with that, I would move approval of SUB 20-30 preliminary and final plat, 1715 South Longmont Avenue.
Second.
We have a motion second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, SUB 20-31, Coal Bluff. Welcome back, Cody.
It's a quick trip. Madam Mayor, members of council, this is a request for preliminary plat approval of a residential subdivision that includes 55 buildable lots. 39 of the lots are for dwelling units and another 16 are for garages associated with the homes. The 2.5 acre site is located just southwest of the corner of Fairview Avenue and Cole Road in West Boise. The property is zoned C2D, or general commercial with design review, that does allow residential uses with the conditional use permit. The project did receive that approval earlier this year. That decision was not appealed, so it is only the subdivision that is before you this evening. Before we get into the subdivision, just briefly on some background, there's quite a bit of history actually here from a planning perspective. It's the site of an old elementary school that was demolished, I believe, in 2008. The property has actually also been part of 2 separate rezone applications. Most recently, it was rezoned to the current commercial designation, but subject to a development agreement. That agreement allowed commercial uses along Fairview, but limited the uses adjacent to the residential neighborhood to the south and west. It also limited building height and required additional buffering in those locations. The subdivision before you this evening is consistent with the development agreement. In fact, it provides the residential use that was encouraged when the property was rezoned a while back. Again, that includes 7 detached and 32 attached homes at a density of about just over 15 units per acre. The homes are oriented towards common landscape area with a network of pathways. Access to this portion of the project is provided via service drives that were approved as part of that initial development agreement and rezone. As the record indicates, there was some opposition in the project at the commission. It was focused on potential impacts on that adjacent residential neighborhood. The commission found, though, that the impacts were mitigated through project design and conditions, and I would note that it'll be finalized through the design review process that has yet to occur. The commission, again, unanimously approved the plan unit development and recommended approval of the subdivision. It meets all of the objective standards of the development code, and residential development in this location is certainly supported from a policy perspective. So with that, we are recommending approval of the preliminary plat this evening. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Halliburton.
Hey, Cody, I saw in the memo that it did bring up the tiling of the irrigation. I couldn't quite tell if that was the Russ lateral or what the whole plan was for the lateral that runs through the property.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, it is required. They required at the time of the rezone that the facility be tiled here.
And Madam Mayor, just to follow up with that, and then Cody, I didn't know if it said anything about a pathway along that lateral or if that lateral is completely underneath the development.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, there'll be landscaping immediately adjacent to the parking lots and then a fence right on the property line. The irrigation district is requiring a gravel access road back there, and it's not fenced from access, so that could function. While it wouldn't provide, it wouldn't meet ADA standards, there would be pedestrian access along the back and then west side of the project, if that makes sense.
And then Cody, it looks like there's maybe one bridge that somebody's got going across the Russ lateral. Does that connect onto Coalhaven Avenue, or is that does that go away, or is that not a connection? Is it just to a house?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I believe those are all private parcels there to the south. So I don't believe there is a connection over there.
Madam Mayor, Cody, if you wouldn't mind, I can talk to that a little bit. There was a pathway that connected to the school from this neighborhood. It's unclear whether or not it was a prescribed easement or an allowed use without an easement. At some point, the property owner built a shed across it, even though the bridge still exists. And my memory from the rezone and development agreement was that because they couldn't establish an easement, we were unable to reestablish that as a pathway.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
All right, if no further.
Madam Mayor, I
Go
do
ahead,
have
sure.
a question of Cody. Cody, there's a fair number of trees along the backside of the property. I know they'll be in the middle of what will be a parking area. I also know that we like to have trees in parking to help shade the parking area. Wondered if there's been any effort to inventory those trees and see if any of them could be saved. And if not, during the DR review of this, look at making sure that there is some screening, some vegetative screening on that south side next to the neighborhood where I think the neighbors have been most vocal about their concerns.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, we'll finalize this through design review, but it was noted in the Planning Commission approval of the PUD that there were 37 caliper inches of trees that would be removed that would be required to be mitigated for it. So that was a condition of approval with the PUD.
Okay, and that was a full inventory. That's what I was unsure of with that condition.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, the applicant, Bud, is it Comfer and Tamara Thompson? If you're on the line, you could let us know if there's anything additional you'd like to add or where you stand with regard to the recommendations.
I think it did me. Madam Mayor, this is Tamara Thompson with the Land Group. My computer was activated, but I would like Bud. Bud does have a presentation for you. If we could switch to his computer, please.
Madam Mayor, I don't have Bud on. Is he maybe Neighborhood Works?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, Bud should have access to speak.
Hi, Bud. You should be able to speak and potentially share a screen. Can he share a screen?
Would love to share my screen if possible.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. We're trying something, Bud. Just a second. All right, you should be able to share your screen or take over or whatever they call it on Zoom now, Bud.
Okay, hopefully you can see our presentation.
It's coming. It's on its way, I think.
Okay,
I think you might have to push one more. Oh, we had the like the elevator screen, the in between. And now we don't. So try whatever you are doing again. Please.
my apologies. How about now?
Nope, we see that you're talking, but that's it.
Okay. Let me go back to my internet and see.
And we could ask, are there terms or conditions in the staff report in particular that you wanted to address because you'd like something different? Or if we can't get your presentation, if you're in agreement with them or wanted to answer some questions from council, we could do it that way too.
That we're absolutely in agreement with everything that's been discussed. I think wanted to share, I work for NeighborWorks Boise, and just a perspective of how we approach our developments, I think would have been helpful and was part of our presentation, but certainly isn't something that has to happen.
What I'm going to suggest, but I really appreciate the work that NeighborWorks does. And I'm sure that everybody would like to see it. But I wonder, since we're having trouble and you agree with the terms and conditions of the staff report, and I get the sense looking at council members that they did as well, that we could go ahead and take action, but perhaps you could share the presentation with all of us so that we could review it to better understand for the next time you come before us and what you're looking for and how you do it.
Absolutely, I'd love to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Sorry that the uploading didn't work. But with that, if there's nothing else, I think Council President has something. So Bud, please stay on the line. There might be a question.
Are you still there, Bud? I would love to ask you one quick question.
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate you guys coming forward with this development. I think it's been a tough site, and this seems to meet not just the conditions of the development agreement, but much of what the neighborhood asked for. So I certainly appreciate that. My question has to do whether or not you're planning to try and preserve any of those trees on the south side. Have you looked at putting any of those in the planters where between the parking spaces?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We're excited for the site as well. I think some of what we've had to do with that south side has to do with the ditch company's willingness to have those trees within that area as it relates to how the roots grow and or could be an obstruction or for that matter be.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was recently at an irrigation district meeting and heard from them specifically that there's a certain kind of pipe that doesn't seem to be
Ripped out as they put the canal.
affected by those roots. It might be worth looking into.
Certainly will. Yes, we will.
Thank you.
All right.
That's it.
Well, Bud, thanks again. And if you'll just send that through Cody, we'll all take a look.
Absolutely, we will. Thank you for your consideration tonight. We really are excited about this project and to the degree we can honor the site with some of our architectures and different features, remembering what was once there. We are excited to be a part of that as well.
Thank you. And I would imagine that the future residents will benefit from that and come to enjoy it quite a bit themselves.
I think so.
All right, with that, go ahead and take a motion.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I would move approval of SUB 20-31 Coal Bluff Cottages, Neighborhood Housing Services, LLC, preliminary plat for a residential subdivision of 55 buildable and 5 common lots.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we are moving on to the public hearing portion of our evening. So first up, we have CAR 19-21.
Madam Mayor.
Welcome back, Cody.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of council, this is a request to rezone multiple parcels that total just under 1 acre from R2 or medium density residential to U or the University District. The properties are generally located south of Belmont Street between Denver Avenue and Vermont. These were originally part of a much larger application package that included 6 parcels and a comprehensive plan amendment. Also involved a number of changes to the BSU master plan. BSU, as you probably are aware, they're revisiting their long-term plan. So all of those aspects of the request are no longer before us for consideration. We are now only looking at just 4 parcels. They're all already within the BSU boundaries of the BSU master plan and all already owned by the university. This is consistent with how they've historically approached this sort of thing, where they rezone properties on a somewhat regular basis. These properties and this rezone are not tied to any specific development proposal at this time. They will, however, facilitate future development that is consistent with the long-term vision of the area. The standards of the U or University District that apply across the entire campus will apply to these properties. As you can see in the record, there was a bit of testimony at the commission hearing, but it was focused more on the consideration of a sports facility that was being contemplated earlier in the year. Again, that's not before us this evening. The rezone is consistent with the land use map, Boise State's master plan, and the policy guidance of Blueprint Boise. The commission did unanimously recommend approval of the rezone back in August, and we are recommending you adopt their recommendation and approve the rezone this evening. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Cody, just to clarify, if I'm reading this map right, these are the only R2 parcels left in that U district? Or are we going to have more of these rezones on a smaller basis or small rezones? I guess I'm just saying it'd be great if we're going to rezone this, if we could do it all in one step.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, The colors aren't. I guess they're ideal in that they're very close to the school's colors. But,
Right.
but you notice I see one outlying parcel that appears to still be R2 and not with the university university district that has that hatching. So I believe this does largely
the
capture all
hatching.
of them, but we'll certainly keep that in mind instead of so many bits and pieces.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions for Cody, we've got Drew Alexander for Boise State. And then the Southeast Neighborhood Association has said they're here as well. Hi, Drew. We're going to give every party 10 minutes this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Drew Alexander, representing Boise State University, 1910 University Drive, Boise, Idaho 83725. Cody, thank you and all the other members of the Planning and Development Services team who have helped with the application along the way. It's been a little over a year since we submitted, so a lot of people have been involved, and I just want to say thank you. There have been a lot of changes to our requests, and they primarily reflecting two things. One of which is the suspension of the originally proposed baseball program. And the second is some active and ongoing conversations with neighbors and neighborhood associations. And I'd just like to take a few minutes to make a few comments on that second reason. We are in the home stretch with a large stakeholder group discussing the neighborhood nearest to campus. And that process is creating, I think, some long sought after predictability and certainty for all parties involved, but also identifying various next steps. Council President Clegg, Boise State, would definitely like to thank you tonight for your participation so far in that process. It was conversations leading up to and during those meetings that prompted us to remove the two parcels nearest the neighborhood from our rezoning request. We started this process with 18 parcels subject to a potential rezone. The one that was just referenced on the map is in fact still privately owned and would retain an R2 zoning in that area of campus, but it is the only remaining parcel in that area that is privately owned. That stakeholder effort and others like it illuminate the importance of what planning circles call the town-gown relationship. Boise State cannot ignore the importance of the city around it and vice versa. And our hope is that a solid foundation is being laid for meaningful and long-lasting work. There are a few exciting prospects coming out of these chats, including housing for Boise's workforce, strengthening the sense of place within neighborhoods, and safe transportation. Our stakeholder group has their final meeting this upcoming week, but our hope is that the process acts more as a starting point rather than a finish line. Going back to that first reason, of which was baseball, as you know, a difficult decision was made to suspend the program earlier in the year. And I'd just like to thank everyone that voiced their support for the program since the suspension, including those that testified at Planning and Zoning back in August. What the cancellation ultimately means from a campus planning perspective is that we're back to the drawing board in a sense. However, Boise State does have a new strategic plan underway, and we recently completed a student housing market analysis. We'll be using that feedback along with ongoing neighborhood planning to inform what happens in this part of campus. It's an important area of campus making up our southeast edge, and we'll be taking great care with the use that's ultimately proposed there. And with that, that's the only comments that we would like to share tonight, but we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Drew. Are there questions?
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to thank Boise State for their willingness to work with the neighborhood and the city on rethinking this master plan. Thank you, Drew.
Madam Mayor?
Go ahead.
Yes, I echo Council President Clegg. I was a homeowner for 8 years in the area near Boise State, and one thing I wanted to see was an opportunity for you to graduate from being a student to being a homeowner and to really making a home near the university. I think it's good for students to have those interactions, not just with fellow students, but perhaps with alumni, with people who took their degrees and decided to become homeowners and to call that part of Boise their own. I wish I still lived there, quite honestly. It was a vibrant place to live, to be able to look out my front window and see Boise State students quite literally stop and smell my roses, smell the flowers. And the reason those flowers were there was because our neighborhood association had forged a partnership with the horticultural department at Boise State. And there were horticultural students who did their senior projects, did their final projects by putting in xeriscape native plants, drought-resistant plants in the right-of-way strips, beautifying our neighborhood. And so it would be lovely to see that sort of partnership and collaboration, and a nice mix of the type of people who call that part of Boise home. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have on my list the Southeast Neighborhood Association's Neighborhood of Record. Is somebody from SENA here? I don't have a name tied to SENA tonight.
Madam Mayor, I don't see our regular SENA representatives online.
All right, if there's somebody that's not the regular SENA rep, but the SENA rep, you can raise your little Zoom hand.
Madam Mayor, no hands are raised.
Okay. Great, well, thank you. So we have two members of the public signed up, Matt Erpelding and Randy McDermott.
Madam Mayor, neither of those are online.
Alrighty. Is anybody else online waiting to testify on this rezone application? Okay. Well, with that, the record will reflect that nobody was here to testify, that we heard from the applicant, and I'll close the hearing.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
with that, I will move approval of CAR 19-21, Boise State University, rezone of 4 parcels totaling 0.83 acres from R2 to University Zone between South Belmont and Denver Avenue, south of Belmont Street between Denver Avenue and Vermont.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Wait, I heard somebody. I didn't.
it was me, Holly.
Oh, hi. Okay, Council President Pro Tem.
I just want to thank Boise State for staying so diligent as there are so many changes happening on campus, and making sure that the master plan is carefully thought out and has the input of neighboring residents. I'm looking forward to seeing the student housing plans that come forward, because we know that there's a shortage of housing around there. It's causing some consternation with neighboring families and residents. So I look forward to working to make sure that there's enough space for all of the students, that they can walk to campus. Hopefully they can leave their cars at home, and we can create a really vibrant university district that is really complementary to our university.
All right. Well, with that, yes, thank you, Drew, for joining us this evening. Look forward to more conversations. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thanks, everybody. Next up, we have CAR 20-9.
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is a request for a rezone of just under 1 acre from R2 or medium density residential to R3D or multifamily residential with design review. There is also a preliminary plat with this item that includes 20 buildable lots. The roughly 1 acre site is addressed at 1709 South Federal Way, which is just south of the Overland Road Federal Way intersection. These applications were heard in conjunction with a plan unit development and variance. The commission at that time approved the plan unit development and recommended approval of the rezone and subdivision. They did deny the variance, and that decision and the approval of the plan unit development were not appealed. So it is only the rezone and subdivision before you this evening. The property is designated mixed use on the land use map. R3 zoning is allowed in this designation, and the moderate to higher density residential development is anticipated. The mixed use designation actually allows a number of zoning districts. The R3 zone and the density it allows makes a lot of sense here. A Federal Way is a mobility corridor with enhanced facilities for bicycles and pedestrians. You also have bus service about 600 feet to the north at Overland Road. You also already have zoning and a development pattern in the area that is consistent with what's proposed. Moving on to the subdivision, again, it includes 20 buildable lots. Each will be occupied by a townhome. These townhomes will be accessed from a single service drive off the Federal Way. The frontage will be improved with 5-foot detached sidewalk and landscaping. The street trees will be provided between the sidewalk and the townhomes. Now, the project will require the removal of some trees, most of which are actually unhealthy or undesirable species. However, the applicant is saving 30 trees and planting 23 more, which from a caliper perspective is slightly exceeding the required mitigation. In terms of connectivity, there was no real opportunity here for actual public street connections. However, we believed and continue to believe there's merit to a pedestrian connection to the west. Unfortunately, there's a private easement or privately owned parcel over there that precludes it at this time. That being said, there is still a condition in the approval that requires an easement in the project to allow connection in the future should things change. And the condition required that show up on the actual subdivision plat as well. One individual did speak at the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. There were concerns focused on height, density, views, and parking. The buildings will meet the height limit of the zone, and all required parking has been provided. All other objective requirements of the development code are also met. The density is consistent with that already exists in the area, and the lack of connection actually back to the west will mitigate any impact in terms of vehicular traffic. As you saw in the record, the commission did unanimously approve the project. They found the rezone and subdivision consistent with the objective standards of the code, and also a host of comprehensive plan policies supporting both. They recommended approval of both applications, and we are recommending you do the same this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Cody. Are there questions for staff? Looks like there are not. So the applicant, Ben, are you still with us? Ben Semple?
Yes, I'm here. Madam Mayor, members of council, Ben Semple, 1014 South LaPointe Street, Suite 3, Boise, Idaho, 83706. Yeah, as Cody stated, we are in agreement, we are in agreement with all of the conditions of approval of the staff report. And Cody's presentation did a great job of outlining kind of what we're planning to do on this site. We think that it's a great opportunity for an additional housing type in this area. They are single family owner occupied townhomes. And as you can see from some of the presentation materials in Cody's presentation, really great finishes and some rooftop decks to take advantage of some of the views to the foothills and Table Rock. We are, as he was talking about also the tree mitigation, the 30 trees we're saving do equate to 374 caliper inches. And then the added trees, 27 additional deciduous trees at 2.5 inches caliper each would be 67.5. And the removed trees are 54 inches. So we do exceed the removals, the removed trees. And with that, really, I would stand for questions. Really looking forward to this project moving forward.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, that must have been Councilman Halliburton.
Yeah, no real questions. I just wanted to say thank you both to Ben and the staff for really looking at that future connection to Annette Street as a possibility. It seems like that would make so much sense in being able to cut off and get to a little bit more of a low stress way, or to get over to Federal Way as well. And then Ben, just the rooftop patio, I think is such a great opportunity for that unique space to be able to look over the valley right there. And as something really unique. So great design, and thanks for that future consideration for that connection.
Madam Mayor. Ben, really impressed with this particular project. I think you're right. It will add a new and different needed housing type to Federal Way. Also appreciate that you recognize the value of mature trees, and just wanted to remind you that when you plant your new trees, be sure and log them in our City of Trees Challenge system so that we get them counted, and look forward to seeing this.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. The Neighborhood Association of Record is Vista. I don't have a name associated with that, so I just want to see if anybody is here to testify related to this project.
Madam Mayor, I do not see any hands raised to speak.
All right. We'll let the record reflect that. And if there are no other questions, Steph, I'm going to go ahead and close. Oh,
Madam Mayor, I have a quick question that I just thought of. And it might be for Cody. So this project is directly up the hill from Manitou Park. Do we have, or are we planning any kind of canal crossing and access down from Federal Way to that park?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, not to my knowledge. I think, across Federal Way here, there's quite a slope in most locations down to the canal, so it would probably prove quite challenging. I could certainly follow up and look into that a little bit and report back, but to my own knowledge this evening, no, we don't have anything planned.
I think they have pretty nice connectivity to Terry Day also, but I just kind of thought of that. Manitou is such a beautiful park, so it'd be neat to have as many people able to access that as possible.
great. We're on with that.
With that, I think we need to do this in two motions. With that, I would move approval of CAR 20-9 rezone of two properties on Federal Way, 1709 and 1711 South Federal Way.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
And that rezone is from R2 to R3D, sorry.
Thank you. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And Madam Mayor, I move approval of SUB 20-33 preliminary plat.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Next up, we have CFH 20-35 CWJ Properties and Leone Hills Subdivision SUB 20-17. This is an appeal. So first we'll have David, welcome, present for staff.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, before you tonight is a preliminary plat approval for the 4-lot Leone Hill Subdivision number 2 on 9.28 acres and an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission approval of a Category 3 hillside grading permit. The subject property is currently zoned R1B with only a small portion on the south side zoned A1. And as you can see from the aerial photograph, the surrounding area is comprised of residential neighborhood on the north, east, and west. And at the intersection of Bogus Basin and Cartwright to the south, there's a church and a fire station. This is the preliminary plat layout. And as you can see, the lots are fairly large, ranging in size from 1.2 to 4 acres in size. And there is some history on the site and that the subject property was initially platted as Lot 3 of the Leone Hill subdivision with the intent to be developed as a single family house. The grading of Lot 3, which included the service drive and the building pad, was completed in approximately the early 2000s, and the grading created a relatively flat area in the top of the ridge. And the applicant intends to grade this relatively flat area into 4 building pads, each on its own lot. And this is the grading plan. You can actually see the 4 building pads that are being proposed. From the grading plan, I would note that the applicant intends to keep the existing shared drive connection to Cartwright Road to the buildable areas on the top of the ridge. This shared driveway will be expanded to comply with the fire department requirements. In addition, the building pads are located along the west property line, and the shared driveway will basically approach them on the east side, or located on the east side of the building pads. At the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, the commission heard testimony from the applicant and from several neighbors expressing concerns with the proposed project, which included the appellant. After the testimony, the commission discussed the project and approved the hillside grading permit and recommended approval of the preliminary plat. As such, the appellant submitted an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval, expressing concerns of the stability of the slope on the west, or the western slope. And these are the 2 grounds for the appeal listed here. At the Planning and Zoning Commission, the appellant submitted an opinion letter from MTI, their geotech engineer, and noting the instability of the western slope. To address these concerns, the appellant suggested this design change you see here, which would relocate the building pads to the east and the shared driveway to the west along that western slope edge. This would protect the western slope from irrigation and stormwater runoff, and also protect it from being disturbed by the homeowners. However, the appellant does not wish to change the design or to relocate the existing service drive to the west, since it currently contains some infrastructure, which was installed with the original plat back in 2000s. Also, in response to the opinion letter from MTI, the Public Works engineer reissued their comments after the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing on July 13th and recommended the stability of the western slope be protected and that the site design be changed in a similar manner to what the appellant is requesting. As such, the planning team recommends the appeal be upheld and a condition be added requiring that the stability of the western slope be protected. In short, the planning team does not believe the Planning and Zoning Commission decision was arbitrary or capricious, since the item was discussed thoroughly at the hearing. However, due to the technical information presented at the hearing, there was not enough time for the commission to fully consider this information or for the Public Works engineer to review and revise the recommendation. Therefore, the planning team believes the commission decision was not based on the substantial evidence due to this unique situation. The planning team also recommends approval of the preliminary plat. Council should note that they have discretion to change the plat layout and the project design with their review of the preliminary plat if they so choose. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So David, question for you. Given your recommendation, I just want to clarify for the record, you're recommending that we uphold the appeal only by adding this condition for stability of the western slope. And in doing that, we're not necessarily requiring the applicant to change their design. We're just asking them to prove that the design they currently have will, in fact, protect the stability of that western slope. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is absolutely correct. The condition is designed to ensure the Public Works engineer, the applicant, take whatever means necessary to protect that slope. I didn't want to prescribe a specific design change, being that there could be other engineering solutions that could achieve the same thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll hear from the appellant. In the case, we're going to do 10 minutes per party.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street, representing the applicant, or excuse me, the appellant. I'm used to saying representing the applicant. That's a reflex at this point. So the appellant is ZWJ Properties and its principal, Zeke Johnson. David, do you have oh, you do have it up. Thank you. So as I mentioned at P&Z, this is a situation where we are not in opposition to the development of this site. This is something we think should be developed. Our concern is about the details. So my client developed the Wind Hollow subdivision that's immediately to the west of this project. So as you're looking at this slide, it's just on top of it as you look up. And you can see that the topo map there is steep. That's a significant grade going from this project down to my client's project. Next slide. It's that steep slope that is the source of our concern. This is the view from the southwest facing toward the proposed subdivision. And when Wind Hollow was developed, it was studied. And one of the requirements that came out of that study was installation of significant catchment walls. About $500,000 worth of catchment walls had to be put in. They are rated to handle highway loads. I mean, these are significant. This is a significant thing, and it was done because of concerns about slope stability when this project was originally approved. So that's what you can see there with the yellow arrows. Next slide. So this is the letter that David mentioned that we presented at the last hearing. And when we were there, we expressed two concerns. And one of them was a question of the wildland-urban interface. One concern is, if the wildland-urban interface in the defensible space goes over the edge of those slopes, is that going to create more erosion as people go in and maintain and do the things that you have to do to make sure that defensible space is there? But primarily, and I think the issue that we're going to be talking about mostly tonight, is this question of irrigation and also overwatering, but irrigation in general along that edge. MTI, as you can see here, confirmed this with the letter in your file, and it recommended a no water zone to prohibit potentially destabilizing effects of water irrigation, runoff, and subsurface discharge. So our suggestion at the time was, as David mentioned, was, if you don't mind going to the next slide, was to relocate the driveway. It's only portions of the driveway, but we think that this makes the most sense because if you just put in CCNRs, for example, a no water zone, you're going to be relying on those same CCNRs and the HOA to enforce, to address something that could potentially be catastrophic if there is overwatering and if there is an issue. It would create a buffer that in our view would be far more effective in preventing any issues with regard to watering at all. Next slide, David. So since we filed our appeal, we were happy to see Public Works revisit the issue. This is what you see on the screen is what Public Works had indicated. In other words, that the driveway should be relocated to create the buffer that we were talking about to prevent runoff on the neighboring slope. And it was with that modification that Public Works indicated that this could meet the requirements of the hillside ordinance of avoiding and creating instability on neighboring slopes. Today, we saw that there was a new document that was introduced that it has a cover sheet on it of October 6th. It's a new All West geotechnical report. Obviously, given the timing, we haven't had a chance to put that in front of an engineer, ask them to respond to it. I'll leave it to your attorney to advise you as to how and whether that can be considered for purposes of this appeal. But a couple comments that I would make on that. First, there's no proposal in that report to create a meaningful no water zone. There's a suggestion, as I read it, that there may be a 5-foot area that's proposed, but a 5-foot area would be immediately adjacent, presumably, to other landscaping. And that 5-foot area is not going to be adequate, in our view, to address the issue that is being raised here in the first place. The report also suggests that a blowout of the water lines below the driveway is a bigger concern. Of course, that would have dire implications wherever it occurs on either side, if it's on the existing side or on the other. But if those risks can't be controlled through proper engineering, then there's no way to have a finding that the project won't create soil instability on either side, which is, of course, a basic foothills requirement. Our concerns are based on not on the worst case scenario. They're based on the more likely scenario, which is irrigation, day-to-day irrigation, creating issues along that edge. So with that, I think everybody's very clear on what our concerns are, and I'd be happy to answer any follow-up questions that you might have.
Any questions for Heath?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
So Heath, question is, do you believe a condition to require that the western slope stability be maintained is enough to achieve what you're asking for?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, our concern is that there be some sort of a buffer that that it mandates that stability to be there and in
Mhm.
place. And that is the scenario that's in front of us, is how do we do that? We've proposed the driveway. Public Works has indicated that that's appropriate. Any of the other solutions that might be out there are not in the record right now. And so I can't really speak to that. In terms of what we know right now, our strong suggestion would be that the driveway be relocated to that western boundary.
Madam Mayor, follow up. So short of designing from the dais, if you will, is there a second condition that we could add in addition to the slope stability regarding drainage, ensuring that drainage not drain to the west, that would give you comfort?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, certainly ensuring that the drainage goes the other direction would be a start. But the issues that we're looking at are things like irrigation of landscape and the kinds of things that are very difficult to control on a day-to-day basis that could create the erosion that we're talking about here. So just general storm drain, yes, I think it's already designed to go to the east.
Not storm drain, but the slope, when you build the pad, make sure that the pad drains not west, but east.
Council President Clegg, certainly that should be part of it, but from our perspective, making sure that there's a surface there that's not going to be landscape, that's not going to be watered, that in our mind is the best way to address the issue.
I see. Thank you. Madam Mayor, I see we have Public Works here. I wonder if I could ask a question.
Yes, of course. Come on up.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Jason Taylor, Public Works Engineering.
Welcome, Jason. So question, if we don't try to design from the dais, but just condition this, are you comfortable that the outcome will in fact maintain the stability of that western slope, not just in the construction of the subdivision, but as it's used over time by the new residents?
That's the question. The condition I put in there is the strongly suggest part of it, because we don't like to design these for the applicants, right? But there are other alternative methods that we could possibly come up with. But that being said, if it's just a direct landscaping type requirement, then what happens when they decide to put a pool on that leading edge and put a vanishing edge on there and it leaks?
Okay.
And then the issue at hand here is the top 2 to 3 feet of this soil is the unstable soil, not the underlying soil that's deeper to cause a global stability. So I thought about this quite a bit before I wrote this letter to kind of back up this a little bit, and talked with the city engineer as well. It's just difficult for us to control that as staff. When it's a landscaping with a pool, we could do it because it's permitting, but then somebody like myself has to remember that this subdivision shouldn't have a pool or a hot tub on a slope. So it gets real difficult at that point. Well, I felt that this design of putting the access road on the west side was the easiest and kind of the final nail in the question of, okay, nothing can be developed on that side of the road because there's a road there. They're not going to put any landscaping in there because the road's there. So I figured that was the easiest way. The applicant talked about existing infrastructure. The infrastructure that's actually in the ground right now is joint trench. There is no sewer, like city sewer service. So everything that they're going to have to put in for those individual houses will have to be put in during the development phase. So that road, like they said, was built in 2000. So it's a 20-year-old driveway that we don't know if can support the garbage trucks, construction trucks, or even fire trucks. So they're gonna have to prove to us that that'll actually have to be in place. But so with that, just that small section for those 2 lots, I thought it was appropriate. Sorry, a little long-winded today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Also have a question for you. Can you help me understand the no water zone and idea and how we would integrate that if we were to?
From the geotechs, and this is where we come into a little bit of a query. We got two professional geotechnical engineers, basically on opposite sides, and they're both, highly sought after engineers in the valley. So when one says, "Hey, let's keep the water off the slope," and the other one is saying, "I don't see an issue," that's where I come into the third party. It's like, okay, as the city, this is something that I would probably send out to a third party geotech and get their opinion as well. But to come up with some sort of no water zone, I say it's really hard to enforce for us. And then the ramifications usually is somebody did overwater, caused a slump, and it affects the downhill neighbor who had nothing to do with this. So it gets real technical. And then so we did bring into the, I read the previous geotech reports for the Wind Hollow subdivision, Zeke's subdivision, and they did have some pretty extensive comments and addendums to this slope stability. And that's where the $500,000 slope stability walls came in, was because of superficial slumping and the issues they had. So it's a tough one. I mean, it is tough. I get it.
All right, it looks like that's it for now.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So next up, we have the applicant, JO Development. And I've got Doug JO and also David Powell listed. Just let us know if it's both of you. If one of you is sharing, it looks like we've got the presentation here. Or no, somebody's moving that around. Nope.
That's me.
All right. Doug or David, are you here?
This is David.
Hi there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Start off with, Madam Mayor, this is Dave Powell, address 2447 South Vista Avenue, and I'm the project civil engineer for the Leone Hills subdivision number 2 project, representing Mr. JO.
Great, thanks.
Start out with, Jason just mentioned that you've got 2 geotechnical engineers on opposite sides. The letter that All West presented to you suggests a 5-foot no water zone. So they understand and agree with the need. So they aren't opposed. They might be opposed to how that gets accomplished, but I do believe they're both in fair agreement. So I apologize for being a little verbose here. I've got a pretty lengthy presentation that was prepared mostly for the appeal. So I'm going to go into that. And I think I get to a point here in my testimony where I think I'm going to try and align myself a little bit with Councilwoman Clegg in making some recommendations, but I need to go through this presentation first to support the denial of the appeal. We're strongly.
Mr. Powell, I'm just going to point out, I hear you say it's pretty lengthy. We gave 10 minutes to each party, so I'm going to need you to fit it into that. And then I'm sure the council president will have some questions to follow up, given that you say you have some proposals to make.
I think I'm pretty much right on that 10-minute mark. So let me get going. Before I go too deep in my testimony, I wanted to bring up a few items. In Mr. Clark's testimony at the P&Z hearing, he suggests that 3 things be changed in our project. First, Mr. Clark asked that the defensible space be shifted from the lower property line to the top of the slope. We simply ask that the council honor the code as it relates to setbacks. It is our intention to locate this defensible space from our west property line where we begin our control, and then take that 30-foot space up the hill. Second, Mr. Clark would have us establish a no water zone at the top of the slope. This was the only recommended change to our project from the MTI opinion letter. There was never a mention in this letter of a shift of the defensible space from MDI. Lastly, Mr. Clark would have us move the existing access driveway from the east side of the lots to the west side of the lots, and adjacent to the top of the west slope to provide a buffer to guard against overwatering. This was never mentioned in the MTI opinion letter. It is our contention that shifting this access road to the west is a bad idea from an engineering standpoint. Mr. Taylor, your engineer from Public Works, is on record at the P&Z hearing supporting the project as designed. He has since revised his report, suggesting that this access road be shifted to the west side of the lots based on his review of the same MTI letter that is referred to as opinion letter 2 by MTI. Mr. Taylor suggests that new information is contained in the opinion letter 2 that has caused him to revise his original letter. In fact, there's only an opinion letter that contains no new technical information to support shifting the road, nor does the report make this suggestion. Now to the appeal. The appeal is based on the contention that the commission acted arbitrarily and capriciously, and that the action was not based on substantial evidence. With regard to arbitrary and capricious, the commission acted on staff's recommendation for approval, the detailed testimony of the applicant and Mr. Clark and others from the public, and on the detailed site investigations that indicated that the site was well suited for the proposed development. The commission acknowledged the level of detail in the project reports and their trust in the project professionals and staff professionals to provide a properly designed project. Contrary to Mr. Clark's statement in the appeal, the commission did consider his suggestions, but they just chose not to adopt them. Commissioner Gillespie mentioned that most of the site grading for this project was previously completed 15 years ago with the original development, with no historic impact to adjacent properties from erosion or soil sloughing. He went on to say that he trusted that the city engineer and the applicant's engineer are going to be able to build a stable subdivision. Commissioner Squires commented that she was the city planner for the original Leone Hills project and knew firsthand the level of detailed reviews by professional staff. As for the lack of substantial evidence, Mr. Moser suggests that the commission decision was not supported by all of the substantial evidence in the record. He mentions that the public works engineer did not have enough time to analyze the new geotechnical information during the hearing and provide revised comments. In fact, there was no geotechnical information provided by the appellant, only an opinion letter from MTI with no supporting technical documents. In the MTI letter, they don't represent themselves as the project geotechnical engineer for the original Wind Hollow development, nor does Mr. Clark in his testimony to the commission. In the MTI opinion letter, there is no mention of or recommendation to relocate the access road to the west side of the project. However, MTI does recommend a no water zone and also lists several recommended elements that should be evaluated, including handling of surface and subsurface stormwater, changes in loading and slope stability. All of these recommendations by MTI are typically evaluated in the final plans process and acceptance by Public Works, with or without the opinion letter. Staff recommends that the council uphold the appeal in order to add new conditions to the hillside grading permit. We disagree with the recommendation in that there is not sufficient evidence that the commission acted in error, arbitrary or capriciously, and we do not agree that there was information provided that required more detailed evaluation. You, the council, are well aware that if no error was made by the commission, P&Z decision can't be modified. However, after all of this said, we're sensitive to the specific concerns of the appellant and in developing a properly engineered construction project. We offer the following elements that could be listed as added conditions to the preliminary plat that would bind to the hillside grading permit. We agree to revise the site grading plan to slope all building pads away from the west finished ridge line at a minimum of 2% slope and collect all yard and hard surface runoff and convey to the east access and to the bottom of the east slope for final disposal. That should take care of almost all of the concerns as it relates to serious runoff toward this west slope. In addition, we agree to provide a 5-foot wide xeriscape water zone along the same west finish ridge line to address concerns made regarding overwatering of landscaping. A xeriscape landscape can be provided that would minimize water usage and protect the steeper west slope. These can be added as plat notes in the CC&Rs to give the city a hammer in order to make sure that these are adhered to. We're strongly opposed to the revised Public Works letter that recommends the relocation of the east access roadway to the west side of the lot for the following reasons. Significant grading will be required to relocate this access, which will result in even more site grading along the west slope than is proposed with the current plan. Locating the access to the west side of the lots will require the complete abandonment of the existing east side paved access. This existing access along the east side of the lots actually provides for the best protection of the west slope when combined with the two proposed modifications I've just listed. Due to the required installation of underground domestic water services, sanitary sewer services, storm drain collection, and joint trench that'll all be required to be relocated in this roadway, it's our opinion that this provides for the best protection. As is recommended by All West, our geotechnical engineer, the presence of all of these underground utilities should not be placed along the west side of the lots and west ridge line, but should be located on the east side of the lots within the existing access. Finally, it is critical that the WUI defensible space for our project be measured from our west property line and extend to the east of the required 30-foot buffer zone. We believe that the appeal should be denied and that as part of the preliminary plat, the proposed conditions to modify site grading and adding the xeriscape water zone be incorporated in the preliminary plat conditions of approval. And with that, I apologize for my length and I stand for any questions.
That was very well done. It was only like 5 seconds over. Thank you. Questions for Mr. Powell?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, Dave. So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is that relocating the roadway to the west side of the lot would actually cause disturbance on the west side that might destabilize it, and that leaving it where it is would ensure that any underground digging would occur on the east side, which apparently is the more stable side of the slope as I'm reading these documents. That's one of your points first?
That's one of my points. That's correct.
Okay. And then secondly, you're suggesting that you do slope all building lots 2% to runoff to the east and collect all yard and hard surface runoff on the east portion.
Madam Mayor, Council Member Clegg, that's correct. That is typically done on these types of projects, but where we have the access on the east and we'll be able to collect that storm water, we kind of win two ways. Number one, we grade positively to our collection point. Number two, we protect this west slope.
Okay. And then third, you're suggesting a 5-foot xeriscaped no water zone. On the other hand, the WUI defensible space has to be 30 foot. So I'm wondering, on that 5-foot xeriscape zone, are you still proposing that that land be within the lots, or that they be constructed as a common lot that no one has ownership to and wouldn't be, I guess, tempted to try and take over?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Clegg, it's our intention to have that 5-foot xeriscape begin at the edge of the flat pad and extend into the lot. So yes, in fact, that does occupy a certain portion of the WUI defensible space, but what they would be planting in that xeriscape would be totally in compliance with the planting requirements of the WUI. And we'd be having to submit that more than likely to the fire department for review and approval as well. I think they have a rather extensive list of plant types in and around the building. No specimen trees, no highly combustible plant types, and we would certainly conform to those requirements. So when I say xeriscape,
Let me clarify my question. Would you be willing to put that 5-foot strip in a common lot rather than into the individual lots of the homeowners?
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Clegg, I believe that we could consider that. So what you're suggesting is from the west property line all the way to and 5 foot into the lot, that would be a common lot?
Yes, so that the xeriscape is not part of the private lot, but is actually would have rules and regs around it, subject to the HOA rules and regs about how to take care of it.
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Clegg, where we are murdered on this project in doing that is in the setbacks that would result. And those setbacks pinch these lots so tightly that you're almost not left with a reasonable building pad for this type of home site. So we'd respectfully request some other alternative than
Thank
to.
you. I appreciate that. I hadn't thought of that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
And we have Highlands Neighborhood Association, Jeff Bradley, up as the Neighborhood Association of Record.
Madam Mayor, I don't have that individual online.
Okay, all right. And it looks like we have one member of the public signed up in advance to testify. Nobody's in the room, so I'll go to the online person, Jeffrey Cronenberg.
Yes,
Hi there.
speaking.
Hello.
My name is Jeff Cronenberg. I live at 1059 El Pilar Drive, the subdivision directly on the other side of Cartwright Road. Madam Mayor and City Council members, I would like to testify in support of the appellant. I've lived in this area for 17 years. I've walked every single ridge out there in that area. The actual ridge that leads up to the subdivision starts behind the fire hall off of Cartwright Road and proceeds up, and it actually intersects with the Arrowhead subdivision. There's a tremendous amount of sand and in many spots erosion on that ridge. So I share the concern about erosion, and it's very steep in that particular area where the 4 lots are going to be put in place. The erosion would be caused by physical activity, or as it was mentioned, irrigation. And by the way, I also do xeriscape myself, and xeriscape a lot of times requires a small amount of water just to get the plant started. So that means you still have to have some type of drip irrigation system, which still runs the risk of water being able to run off in that particular area. I have seen erosion in other places along that ridge. In some of the paperwork, it was claimed there was no erosion up on Arrowhead, but on some of the houses that are located right on the ridge line, there is some erosion that goes down into the Highlands Hollow area. So there's just a lot of sand in the area and unstableness, and there is sloughing that is a concern in that area. So those are my main concerns. And I do support the appeal of ZWJ Properties. I am concerned once they get construction growing, I hope that they would respect the residents of El Pilar and not do construction too early in the morning or too late in the evening because of the noise. I do want to throw in, I know it's a done deal as far as the subdivision itself, but a lot of us do have concerns about the impact on Cartwright Road. Cartwright Road has become very congested recently. There's rampant speeding currently on Cartwright Road. In addition, it was mentioned in the paperwork that there is a gravel water containment system with a rock check dam. And I just want to go on record as saying that is actually not fully effective. And when there's heavy rains, there are problems with gravel and dirt and other water coming off. Yeah.
Mr. Cronenberg, you've hit your time.
Okay, thank you, Madam
Thank
Mayor and City Council members.
Thank you. Anyone else on the line to testify for this? All right, then.
Can I ask a question of staff, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, David. So just confirming that the layouts as they exist now, there would be a 30-foot setback from that western property line as a rear yard setback if the roadway were on the east. And if the roadway were on the west, the house could actually be, the front yard setback is less. So the house would, I'm just trying to confirm that if the layout stays the way it is today, that the front yard would be considered to the east and the 30-foot setback would be from that western boundary. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, majority of these are flag lots. So in a flag lot situation, the developer has the opportunity to choose which way their front is because it doesn't really have direct street frontage.
But we could condition it that way.
Yeah, you could condition which way to be the front and back if you wish.
Okay. And could you put the suggested condition, and I did not ask Mr. Powell this question about the grading backup. Your suggested, when you gave your staff report, you said you recommend that we uphold the appeal, but by adding a condition. Could you put the language of that back up? Because I did not write it down. I can't remember it. Thank you. Protect stability of slope. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay, great. And with that, the appellant has 5-minute rebuttal.
Madam Mayor, there are two individuals who raised their hands.
Oh, okay.
We
Sorry
have
about that.
Zeke Johnson and Stephen Holmes.
Now let me double check because I just need to make sure we have to look at parties of record. I have it in this other sheet. Oh, gotcha. Okay, thanks. Okay, I see, was it the Stephen Holmes?
That is correct.
Okay, and then Zeke Johnson, I don't see you as a party of record listed. Is he related to you?
Yes, Madam Mayor, he is the principal of ZWJ, and I think you also have the subdivision element of this as well. So I think folks would be able to testify even if they weren't.
Okay. Well, since he's a principal, that's fine too. So we'll take those two public comments, and then I'm actually gonna have the applicant go first in his rebuttal, and then Mr. Clark will go as the appellant second. So Stephen Holmes.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello. Yes.
Yeah, Stephen Holmes, 3610 North Sonata Way, Boise, Idaho, 83702. Again, I live on the east side of the proposed property, project. After watching everything today, I just want to refocus the council's attention to these, I guess I call them retaining walls that were required to be installed at the base of this slope. I mean, that was a significant expense that they went through to put those in. And I'm assuming they designed those for existing conditions, and now those existing conditions are being changed. So I just want to readdress the focus of maybe those retaining walls. That was a significant expense, and want to make sure that they are still able to do what they were designed to do. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And then Zeke. I don't remember your last name. Thomas? Johnson. Zeke Johnson.
Zeke Johnson, correct. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very well, Zeke Johnson. My name is Zeke Johnson. My address is 2208 North 19th Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. I'm here to some degree on behalf of our Subdivision Owners Association, which I serve as the president, and I was the developer of the Wind Hollow subdivision, so I'm very familiar with the slope stability issues and the catchment walls that were installed. Again, first thing I want to do is just make clear we support this development. Chris and Barb kind of talked to me about it when they first decided to sell, and so we knew what was going on. We expected it. Our only purpose here is to make sure that this project doesn't adversely impact our subdivision. As you've heard, we had to design and install these engineered catchment walls, which are quite extensive. The cost was $500,000, and for a 9-lot subdivision, I'm sure you can appreciate that kind of additional expense. And believe me, we did not want to put them in, but the condition of the slopes wholly warranted the measure. Another thing I want to point out, at the P&Z hearing, the applicant of the Lahoney Hills development made repeated comments that there was no damage to the existing steep slopes. And I just wanted to clarify that, because it was used to somewhat as a form of justification against further protective measures. There is damage to the existing slopes, and you can see it. It started quite a long time ago, and I kind of want to explain how that came about. When the original developer of the Leona Hills property, which is Mike Holman, when he started that development, he put in the road, he put in the water system, and he started to irrigate the top of the slope up there. And folks in the neighborhood actually thought he was trying to have a big green hillside, sort of like Simplot, which is just directly to the north. And in the few years that hillside was irrigated, sloughing of the slope started to occur. And the timing was specifically noticed by the residents of our neighborhood. And that is exactly what we're trying to protect against: sloughing caused by excess water. And I want to take a minute to just explain our concern a little bit more. And first, let's talk about the soils. And as was mentioned, you have a really stable sandstone layer and some soft soils on top. And what happens is water infiltrates through the loose soil, and it gets to the stone layer, the sandstone layer, and then it just drains along that. And over time, it creates a weak plane. And then what happens is that leads to sloughing. And given the steepness of the slopes, it's really all but guaranteed that sloughing will occur. So our next concern is really that after these houses are built, that the homeowners will take it upon themselves to make different areas of their property, look better, or grow bushes, or do this or whatever and whatnot, put a pool in, put a hot tub in, whatever it may be. And there is absolutely no one to police that. And what we don't want in our neighborhood someday is a surprise landslide. And our neighborhood really wants to avoid that. Now, the suggestion by Public Works to move the road, we feel like adds a good hard surface barrier to move the water the other direction, and then it will cause residents not to want to landscape and water that front side, which no one's going to police, as we mentioned. There is I totally agree. There's a minimal amount of additional asphalt paving work and some utilities, but the utilities can still come in on the east side of the homes. We don't have to bring the water line up the roads. They can still come in the back with an easement, and that would be the smart thing to do.
Zeke, I've let you go over a little bit, so I'm going to need you to wrap it up.
All right. That's
All right.
really all. We just feel like there's a few common sense protective measures that would be warranted, reasonable, and we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public here to testify? Any little hands?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Oh, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Nope.
Okay. And with that, we will hear rebuttal from the applicant first and then the appellant second. So, Mr. Powell. And you'll each have 5 minutes. We can't hear you, Mr. Powell. Are you there?
Now I'm here.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that. Had to hit the mute. We understand the concerns of the appellant, and we do want to find a compromise. A few things that I want to make sure gets on the record. The Oni Hills subdivision is a subdivision that was created in the early 2000s, far before the Wind Hollow project was created. The Wind Hollow project went through the same type of requirements that we did. They had a geotechnical report that was created in approximately 2015. And then in 2017, 2 years later, was an opinion and a modification to that report that dealt with the sloughing soils. And I'm assuming that's about the time that they were required to put in $500,000 worth of retaining walls. Those retaining walls were put in specifically to protect against sloughing, regardless of whether it was one lot up on top of the hill or 4 lots or 15. Those retaining walls are in place now. They also, even with the project, cut into the toe of these slopes to create the building pads that exist at the bottom of the slope. I guess I'm aghast a little bit in to say that this slope is so unstable as it's professed to be by the appellant, yet they have built these homes right at the bottom, realizing that the subdivision originally existed at the top. This probably doesn't have any science behind it, but if you could zoom in on that hillside and all the hillsides surrounding it, there's tens of thousands of gopher holes that live in that upper 1 to 2 foot of slope. And yet there's no destabilization from all of that constant digging and pushing out of soils. I just offer that up as a kind of a testimony that there may be signs of a little minor sloughing at one location along this slope, but these slopes are very much consistent with the slopes all through this portion of the foothills. The slopes of Simplots, El Pilar, the Hackberry projects that I've been involved with, they all have the same type of sloughing that goes on, but that sloughing is not catastrophic. It's very localized and generally does not result in global instability of the slopes. And with that, I'll close.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Look, I think we've got a question.
Dave, one last question. I think you'd agree that You also want to protect the stability of the slope along the west property line. Is that true?
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Clegg, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Heath, go ahead.
Again, for the record, Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street. And I'll be brief. Sloughing is a problem. If it occurs, it accumulates, it begs the question of who's going to restabilize all of that. All of these questions are things that I think are very much within the purview of this group to look at, because one of the items that have to be satisfied under the hillside and foothills ordinances is that you not create soil instability on neighboring properties. So let's focus on what actually is in the record. MTI indicated that it had concerns about slope stability in this area. MTI indicated that there should be a no water zone. MTI did not have to propose the driveway solution. That's a red herring. We proposed the driveway solution because it satisfied what MTI had proposed. And the way it does it is to create a hard surface barrier that can't be landscaped. Our concern with the 5-foot proposal, which we weren't aware of until today, is that it just isn't meaningful to address the issue, which is watering. The gophers are not going to be out there watering lawns, and just with much love to Dave. But the watering of the landscaping is the issue that will create the problem. We think that the driveway solution solves it. Your Public Works group researched this in contrast to what Dave said tonight. Jason indicated in his testimony that he researched the record and looked at the studies for Wind Hollow and then arrived at the solution that he proposed or that he suggested is appropriate, which is to move the driveway. There has to be a solution in order to satisfy the requirements of the hillside and foothills ordinance, and we think the driveway does it. So with that, I'll conclude.
Thank you.
Other questions for the appellant, staff?
And Mayor, I've got a question for staff, Councilmember Health.
Thanks, Keith.
So I am certainly having some difficulty, as it's been stated a couple of times, designing any of this stuff from the dais. And I guess my question for staff is, are there additional tests and studies that could be done to better guide what the most stable and the most sensible option is here? And then I guess the second question is, will there be additional tests and studies that do that anyway? So like, do we need to put an additional condition on here to have these studies done? Or in the next steps of all these processes, will these studies and tests be done anyway to make sure that nothing negative would happen as far as the slope stability goes?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'll defer to Jason Taylor.
Madam Mayor, council members. Yes, to answer your question, there will be additional studies. So in the documentation for the hillside technical guidance manual, the geotechnical report is a preliminary report. It kind of gives the overview. They do some test pits and borings. The final report is a little bit more robust and may require additional testing. In my conditions of approval for this subdivision, the one I originally wrote and the revisions, it had a detailed list of requirements I would require for the geotech to answer these questions, including a slope stability analysis and probably further testing of those soils. That's kind of a given with most of these hillside developments. This one's going to be a little bit tough because the majority of the slope is on private property. So it's going to be tough for this developer to get onto Zeke's property and do that kind of testing on the slopes that are technically on his land. They can probably make some assumptions based on the soil types and the property on their side of the slope, but it will happen, that the additional testing will occur.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just a procedural question for David, probably. Does the additional condition that you're proposing, would it go on the grading permit or on the subdivision?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I would suspect the be a specific site condition for the grading, although the two are linked.
Okay. So in the grading section of the conditions okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Are there further questions before I close the hearing? All right, hearing is closed.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to try a motion just because I think if we get all this on the table, then we can talk about it. I would move that we uphold the appeal in finding that additional conditions are required in order to ensure the stability of the western slope in this project, and that those additional conditions include a site-specific condition to protect the stability of the slope along the western property line, and 3 conditions added to the subdivision portions of the approval that would require that lots 1 and 2 be required to consider the western property line as the rear yard for setback purposes, that all lots be graded, that all the building lots, the pads themselves be graded with a 2% slope to run off to the east to collect all yard and hard surface runoff, that a 5-foot no water zone be established along the top edge of the ridge, and that at final plat, the developer come back to us with conditions that will ensure that that 5-foot zone actually is not watered.
Second.
Thank you. So just a little bit of illumination. Obviously, the protect the slope along the western property line is, I think, something everyone agrees on. I believe that the grading process will determine if the road needs to be moved or not to accomplish that. If it does not need to be moved, even if it does need to be moved, setting that rear setback as the western would get the buildings as far from the western slope as we can, either direction. That the grading so that the runoff all goes to the east, I think is only sensible. And I specifically did not say xeriscaping because I believe that that 5-foot strip should probably be gravel, but should not be something that has water on it. And I will leave it to the subdivision process between this preliminary plat and the final plat to determine how that's accomplished.
Was that a motion? No.
Yeah, that was a
and second.
motion.
That was your comments.
Yeah,
Great.
those were my comments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Other comments?
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Holly.
Let me go with Holly first. Okay, sure. Council President Pro Tem.
I want to thank Council President Clegg for so succinctly figuring out a good solution for this. I think that it's a solution that takes care of a lot of people's concerns, very valid concerns about erosion. We've been, as a city, very careful about hillside lots. I know because of some applications in my own neighborhood that have gone through the ringer. So I think that this is a great way to ensure that we're preserving our hillside slopes and also allowing some additional residential development. So thank you.
Madam Mayor, I also agree with the choices that were set forth by Councilmember Clegg. I think I only had a few of those, and you included some additional ones that I think are really good and get to where we need to be. And I'll be supporting the motion. I guess outside of the displacement of thousands of gophers, I support this.
All right. It looks like everybody's had their say. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thanks, everybody.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, we're adjourned. Good night, everybody.